I've always said that the single greatest friend of depression is solitude.
Yes.
And you don't have to live on your own to experience that. You detach yourself from the people who you're living with. And the greatest enemy of depression is social connection. Where are we more likely to forget about our worries? And we all have those at times. Lying on a couch in your own company or out and about, whether you feel like it or not.
This podcast is part of the GK Media Studios Creators Network, helping people tell their stories. Become a storyteller today and learn about our podcaster network at gkmediastudios.com.
Welcome to Psychology with a Sparkle, the podcast. This is episode 7, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Shane Martin, psychologist, author, poet, public speaker, founder of Mood Watchers, and very esteemed colleague of mine. Welcome to the podcast, Shane. Delighted to have you here.
I'm delighted to be here, Denise. It's always nice chatting to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Shane, for the listeners and for anyone who doesn't know you, would you give a brief intro of yourself?
Yeah, okay. Well, my first career was as a secondary school teacher. I think I became a teacher by accident, really. A lot of 18 and 19-year-olds don't really know what they want to do. I did like Irish and I did like history, so I pursued a degree in Irish and history. And after 3 years, I was having such great fun at university, from being in a boarding school initially at secondary school to total freedom at third level. A few of the lads in the house with me said there's a thing called a H-dip. And I said, does that mean another year here on campus? They said, yes. I said, I'll put my name down for the H-dip.
Yeah.
I said, we'll go for another year's rent. So I think, I became a teacher by accident, but it was a way for financial independence. And I pursued teaching for 9 years. So I taught Irish and history. But for the most part of that, I would have worked in special ed.
Okay.
So I would have been meeting a lot of psychologists in the special class that I headed up at the time. And I loved teaching. I think a lot of people think you have to change when you're unhappy. I didn't leave teaching because I was unhappy. I wanted something new, something different.
So which leads me to my next question. Yeah. Your entry to psychology.
Yeah, I think it's easier to be honest about these things when you grow older. I wouldn't have been saying this at the time, but I knew that I was a little bit bored in teaching, and I mean that with the utmost respect to the profession.
Sure.
Possibly it was because I was in special ed. You can teach the sounds of the alphabet to the sheep come home or the cows come home, and you can nearly do it in your sleep after a while. Right. So I wanted a new challenge. That was definitely the case. But I also had friends and family members, and I knew that something had gone wrong, that their lights had gone out. That they had fallen into a dark place. And I remember being intrigued about that, and I had a great empathy and compassion for people like that. And there was part of me that wanted to know more about, I suppose, mental illness. And my aspirations were very noble. I wanted to help people like that. So I decided that would be a nice thing to do for the next chapter of my working life.
Absolutely.
To study psychology and to maybe get a job in that way, where I might be helping people recover from whatever happened, or even to kick the door open and let the light back in again.
Absolutely.
So my aspirations were noble, my intentions were good, and I put my name down for, I think, with the Open University. I did a diploma, a conversion diploma, which allowed me on the Masters in Jordanstown, University of Ulster. And that opened the door to a job that came up when I finished in Jordanstown. Literally, as soon as I qualified there was a job in the newspaper for National Learning Network. It was actually the National Institute, it was the National Training and Development Institute at that time, now National Learning Network. And I applied for it and I got the job that I always wanted.
Which is, for anyone who doesn't know, is part of the rehab group. It's the training and learning side of rehab group.
Yes. Yeah. So I would be based in my native Monaghan, and I would visit 2 centres in Dundalk, 2 in Navan and County Meath, and 1 in Cavan. So I was thrown into the deep end.
Sure.
And very quickly I had, I suppose, the people I wanted to help, predominantly mental health was the nature of that job. So I would have had 4 or 5 people every day, 5 days a week. And you get better at things the longer you stick at it, I think.
Absolutely.
Unless
Yeah.
there's something seriously wrong.
Yeah.
But I think the longer you stick at anything, the better you get at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there was part of me that felt that for a lot of those people that I was trying to help, that the psychology was coming in a bit late. It's never too late to help people, and evidence-based strategies are always the best ones. But you can sow the seeds of mental wellness with psychology as well as understand mental illness with it.
Which leads me actually to my next question, Shane, which is, we'll revisit like NLN in a little while, but I want to ask you a little bit more about your work, because I suppose there's so much in focus at the moment around, you've done like so much work with parents, with students, with teachers across, in schools across the country. And I think the reason it's probably very much in my head is because, that Netflix series, Adolescence, that everybody's talking about, and just the different kind of profiles and, how the school system, how kind of parenting, how there's all the different impactors that affect young people. What are maybe some of the things that you notice, Shane, or continue to notice maybe in your work across schools? What are the kind of themes that seem to come up amongst, young adults, amongst adolescents?
Well, I think research indicates that there has been a significant growth in anxiety among younger people. And I think it's quite competitive. I think the system hasn't changed that much, because despite some very welcome curriculum change, it's still down to 7 subjects at the end of 6 years over a period of 3 weeks. And that's your passport to the next place. And there are, and I've always been aware of this, some very intelligent, talented teenagers who are not good at reading and writing, or learning things off by heart, or regurgitating material, in a set time frame.
Yeah.
But that's the passport. Now we make allowances for them to a degree, but a lot of those students don't really taste much success. And like if you and I were taking lessons in golf, and after 4 or 5 lessons we're still missing the ball, like we can give up the game and say, it's a stupid game anyway, thank God we didn't join the club.
Yeah, exactly.
But with students, they have to stay there. So you have some students who fail consistently in some subjects, and then there's teachers who wonder why they're not happy. So I think there was part of me really drawn by positive psychology. Because even when a psychologist visits a school, and we need so many education psychologists, it was traditionally to find out what was wrong in kids. And there was part of me dying to be the psychologist who would assess for what's right in kids. Because you have kids who are absolutely brilliant at things that are not in the curriculum. But if they were given space and time to shine in that area, they would walk taller and they'd be happier inside.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that continues to be the case. I think social media, Instagram and all these things have, I suppose, has highlighted your appearance more and your popularity more as key concepts. That they would all of us have been important during adolescence, but even more so now, because people can unfriend you, people can block you. When you and I were at school, if there was a row, it couldn't continue into the night. But you could have your parents asleep nowadays, and the row might be continuing at 2 a.m. through text messaging. So it can, and you may get involved in other people's rows that you mightn't even know about if you didn't have that technology.
Yeah.
So it's got it's competitive. It's there's this whole emphasis on success, and that is defined differently. It's success as in how we look, how popular we are, how well we do academically. And that puts a lot of pressure on people. And I think then also you have parents who are under serious pressure. And they don't mean to do it, but sometimes they are making things worse at home.
And I think actually that series, that Adolescence on Netflix, I've been telling everybody about it since I watched it, but it highlighted that very well. And kind of what came through very, very strongly was that whole kind of theme of toxic masculinity that young people are experiencing, and as you said, like, the importance of having a good relationship with your parents and, the effects when that's not the case. And also if somebody, depending on where somebody is schooled, depending on how the teachers interact and how involved they are. But again, the impact of that and, these kind of fake friendships and everything being videoed and all of that and those impactors, like how much,
And like when I was growing up as a teenager, like I kind of needed my parents, there was no internet even. I always would have seen them as old fogies, but I would have consulted them at times for their wisdom. So a lot of younger people nowadays don't need to consult their parents at all because they can find anything out themselves. And it's the sources of that information that worry me sometimes because, the world might not be as it's being portrayed, on the websites or the different channels that young people follow at all. And there's no person who loves you, no person who looks out for you in terms of advising you around that when you become that independent and when your parents, I suppose, are very busy as well because parents are working harder and working at home too sometimes.
Absolutely.
So teenagers can easily detach from the wisdom that maybe previous generations did receive and try to make their mind up without having all the information properly, you know?
Okay. So coming back, Shane, to when you were obviously working for the National Learning Network for a period of time, then you decided to break away and go off and do your own thing. So you started up Mood Watchers. So can you tell us all about Mood Watchers?
Well, Mood Watchers was, like I said at the initial part of this interview, that there was part of me that felt that there was too much fire brigade psychology at the expense of fireproofing psychology. And I felt psychology could be more innovative. So it's not that psychology was coming in too late, because it's never too late to help people help themselves. But I just came up with this idea, like I've heard of Weight Watchers. So I said, why not start Mood Watchers? And the idea would be that over 5 Monday nights or 5 Tuesday nights in a hotel meeting room or a community hall, that I would teach people with the best evidence-based psychology how to be healthy and how to be happy and more resilient. I knew that would be a difficult thing to do. So I in terms of explaining what it was. But I got on local radio, Northern Sound Radio, to make my pitch to the audience, to explain what it was and what it wasn't. And I remember a phone call came in and the DJ, the presenter, Donnacht McKeown, said, we have a question here. Someone wants to know, is that course Mood Watchers for people with depression? And I was delighted that the question was asked because I says, yes, it's for them as well. So psychology doesn't have to be solely for people who have symptoms. But anyone with depression, anxiety issues would gain from the course as well, hopefully.
Yeah, so it's for people who want to evolve.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and people who want to. Like I was just reading recently that it's hard to believe it, but we spend most of our life working and sleeping, the life we live. And there's a lot of people who sometimes find themselves in the wrong job or who don't even know that they're in the wrong job. So Mood Watchers was kind of a helicopter view where you'd step back and look at things and steer your own ship. And if we only live this life once, and I think that's an undeniable truth, no matter what religious belief you have or whether you have one. I think we should have a much bigger say in the kind of life we live. And if psychology can help us make better decisions that will make us healthier and happier, we should consult that psychology. As well as maybe seeking it out when we're sick or unwell. So psychology can do, science is as good as it gets for anything really. So you can explain what's wrong, but you can also investigate what's right in people. And you can harness those strengths. And you can live a more productive and happier life if you tap into them.
Absolutely. So there is that evidence base, as you mentioned, that's all important, like in terms of like our work, our professional work as psychologists. But there's also, not everything can be proven by science. And I think that's where, things like, other practices are coming to the fore nowadays in terms of like encouraging people to listen to their own instinct and what's right for them and, to be guided as much by what they feel are the tools that work well for them, just as much as what the professionals and what, you know.
I hear you.
You know. So just in terms of the profile of people then, Shane, that you would have had or that you continue to have on Mood Watchers.
Yeah, well, that first course, I would always have an introductory talk and I was free to attend.
Mm-hmm.
And I would explain what the course was and what it wasn't. Like, for instance, the course wasn't a support group for people with mental health issues. I have great time for those groups and I've even attended them to see what they're like, you know.
Yeah.
It wasn't for people with anxiety or depression, but maybe they could get something from the course.
Sure.
It could be for people who like psychology.
Yeah.
It could be for health professionals or teachers. And I've often jokingly said it could be for spies, and spies were very welcome as well, because the people were very keen to know what I was doing. But the idea was that people would sign up at the end of the introductory talk where they'd know exactly what it was and what it wasn't. And the first course, we didn't have enough seats the first week, and we had to move to the ballroom. And I had over 200 people doing the course by the third week. And it was part of me that knew at that stage that I was onto something. That if you could demystify, destigmatize mental health vulnerability, which is in all of us, and bring psychology into the open for everybody without asking questions about why you want to know about it.
Absolutely.
That you could be on a winner.
Yeah.
And it proved to be the case.
Yeah.
And that Mood Watchers took off in a huge way. So Mood Watchers was delivered in every county on the island of Ireland by me. On numerous occasions. I remember meeting a Minister for State for Mental Health in Letterkenny. We won't name him, but I was at some conference speaking at it, and someone says, "This is Shane Martin, Mood Watchers." And he says, "Oh, that's a very big organisation. You're down in Cork as well." I said, "That's me. That's me that's down in Cork. I delivered the course down there." I says, I remember saying to him, "I'm the chief executive officer and the sole employee of the organisation." But it was lovely, but it was hard on me. I see that now because I was away a lot. So if I was delivering the course in Bandon and County Cork for 5 Monday nights, that meant I was down Sunday night and Monday night, coming back on Tuesday. So I was away a lot and I was driving a lot. I was a younger man then and I didn't mind that as much. And I suppose when you have an idea and when it's working and when people want to know about it and when people are paying you to do it, you get excited with it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So schools heard about me then. I can't remember why that happened, but there was very little about wellbeing at the time in the curriculum. There was no conversations about positive psychology at the time at all either, although it's an area that has grown in a huge way since.
Yeah.
But I think it was a school in Sligo that asked me to speak to the staff. Can you condense Mood Watchers into an hour and a half? I says, that's a bit challenging, but I'll do my best.
Yeah.
Give us the greatest hits of it. And I did that for staff and for students. And then that took off in a huge way. So I would have been in so many schools over 6 years. It's incredible, really. I would have been in over 500 schools on the island of Ireland.
Amazing.
Delivering this course, trying to make the pitch to people that you can have a say in the life you live. And there's things you can do which maybe are worth trying out to see if they help you in certain ways, you know.
But I think as well, Shane, you know, like the fact that you grew so quickly and, you know, you were so popular and continue to be so popular is a testament to your character because, like, as I've always said to you, like you're always kind of, you have this unique ability to be able to kind of help people to understand quite profound and serious points or, you know, particular issues that are relevant in terms of the field of psychology, but you do it in a very light-hearted, upbeat, good-humoured way, you know. Is that always received well? Or do you ever get...
Well, no, for the most part it does. I think sometimes psychology has shot itself in its own 2 feet in that it's seen as a very serious topic.
I'd agree with you on that, yeah.
And I remember once, and this is a true story, I was asked to speak to parents in a school in Donegal and as far north as you can go. And I arrived a half an hour earlier than I should have been. And I saw the gym and the lights on and there were very few cars. I says, it must be over there, you know.
Yeah.
And I drove my car over and let myself in and the principal was putting out the seats, getting ready for the talk. And he must have had about 200 seats. And I said to him, are you expecting a big crowd for the parenting talk? And he says, no, you never know, Shane. You never know until the last minute. It's very hard. And then he said to me, but when I sent a letter home in the newspaper, in the school bags, I didn't say you're a psychologist, so maybe that'll help. And I think that reminded me that sometimes that psychology is seen as something which only talks about what's wrong in human beings, mental illness, deficits, disadvantages, disorders, diseases. It's done a fantastic job at that. Like over 90% of the books in the psychology section in any library are about the things you never want to get. And we need all of that. But psychology can do other things as well, you know.
Yeah. And that's more and more coming to the fore, I think.
I think my success, if it's a success we're talking about, was, you're right, in that I let the audience know that what I was teaching I needed to do myself. In that at the end of the day, I always reminded them of three things. And I say this in every talk I give. The first thing that we all share in common is vulnerability. Like, everybody knows how to cry. We all know what worry is and what anxiety is. No one's made of stone. So it doesn't matter where I am, and it doesn't matter who I'm speaking to. If I was in Beijing, London, or Paris, if I'm speaking to surgeons, doctors, vets, terminally ill people, whoever, we're all vulnerable people. The second thing that we all share in common is that we'll all encounter things in life that we don't want happening. You know, like there's a huge part of the life we live which we've no control over. Now, if you want to think about that for too long, you'd be more anxious than you need to be. And I've always said too much anxiety is a bad job. But there's nothing definite about the future. You can plan for the future, and that's wise. And you can learn from the past. That's wise as well. But this day now is the golden day. And it's very simple psychology, but you can colour it brilliantly with the hours left in it yet. So it's never too late for anyone to turn a corner. It's never too late to embrace a better quality of life. And I think why Mood Watchers worked is it was the truth. Very simple things make a huge difference in a world that has become complicated. But there is a snag.
Okay.
You have to do them.
You do.
You have to do the things.
Yeah. So what are some of the things, in terms of tools, when we talk about tools, what are some of the things that you personally find useful in terms of maintaining good mental health, positive mental health?
Well, we've heard them before, but you know, it's important to emphasise them. But when I moved to Sligo, I'm a Monaghan man. When I moved to Sligo permanently 4 years ago, I decided that for the rest of my life, I'd walk at least 6 kilometres every day. It mightn't be all in one go, but before 11 o'clock at night, I'd have at least 6 kilometres done.
Yeah.
And the reason why I wanted to do that is because people who exercise on a daily basis live longer. They encounter less mental and physical illness. Like structured daily exercise rivals antidepressants in many studies. I'm just saying, so, but it's easier to take a tablet, which also works for many people. You need discipline to make the exercise happen. And it took me quite a while to get into the discipline of it. But it now just happens anyway. And after 6 weeks, I was sleeping better and I was harder to row it.
Yeah.
Because chemically...
you're releasing endorphins.
Yeah, I think so. I was in a much better place. Yeah. And that always happens now. And that's the first class of Mood Watchers. I give all the science around that. And I asked the audience, can you try to commit for the 5 weeks to some form of daily exercise?
Activity.
I said, give it a shot. I says, if you're here to do the course, why not give it to 5 weeks? You know, and nearly always in the studies, it's after a period of 5 to 6 weeks, people report significant improvement
because
in mood.
Because that's when the serotonin kicks in. Like, so you get the immediate endorphin release, but then over time, it's
big
the
time
serotonin
Denise,
that gets
so
released.
So the truth is, if I was the Minister for Education, I would quadruple the amount of PE in schools. And I'd watch with glee as anxiety rates would dramatically drop among young people. But we're still obsessed with academic things. And we'll never have enough psychologists. So maybe the psychology is what we should be focusing on.
Yeah.
So that would be one massive one.
Exercise, What else?
The second one is a lot of people don't realise how much to contribute to their own misery. In that a lot of people don't do the things that they're good at and the things they love best. And in fact, a lot of people are doing the things they hate most. and in very bad form a lot of the time. So I was always intrigued by the concept of psychological flow, and you know this yourself, but the audience mightn't, that psychological flow is a state of being where you lose consciousness of yourself, others, and the world around you, where you have no sense of time. And usually you experience that when you have a hobby, when you're doing something that you really love doing.
Yeah.
And they're the things we give up as we grow older. A lot of people just work and sleep, and they want to know why it's not happening. And sometimes we fall in love with somebody who doesn't have the same interests. And we do the things we both hate together. I want to know why we're so frustrated. So I think sometimes you have to set him or her free to do the things that he or she likes, as well as doing things together.
Absolutely.
Because it's very easy to put yourself in bad form by saying, all I do is work. I get nothing from life. But like about 4 or 5 years ago, I did a weekend residential course in antique clock repairs. And I've discovered I'm quite good at that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That I can go around auctions and I can see what clocks might be worth fixing.
Yeah.
And I remember fixing this clock, I'd say an American drop dial clock from 1840 in the kitchen. And I was at it, I'd say about 4 hours unknowingly. And my wife came in and she says, Shane, do you realise you're at that clock for 4 hours now? And I says, I do. I says, every man needs his flow. Every man needs his workshop. And she says to me, that's what I want to talk to you about. This is my kitchen. So I have a workshop now as well. But when I'm fixing that clock, my worries are not keeping me company.
Yeah.
I don't know what time it is. So
You're
flow
in that
might be
flow
just
state, yeah.
reading a book at home, and all of a sudden you smell the burnt dinner.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry about the burnt dinner, but from a psychological perspective, you and I would be very excited about what's happening in the human brain.
Yeah.
And that you have lost all grip of society, relationship difficulties, staff room tensions. You've become absorbed by the task at hand. So that's very simple, isn't it? Between the exercise and then also, doing something, joining something, putting your name down for a course, paying for the course in advance to ensure that you'd actually do the course.
Yeah.
Like I've tried pottery as well, not that good at it, but it certainly intrigues me, and I experience flow trying to get better at it. So when you're being stretched like that.
Absolutely. And that's what enhances confidence as well. And I think another point as well, Shane, which I know you're an advocate of as well, because it's something that we'd work on with clients all the time, which is around thought hygiene. And even earlier there, I was saying I need to give Tranquility Jewellery a shout out, because Amy who's here in the studio in GK Media Studios was admiring my rings, and I was saying that Tranquility, they have these rings, which I'm wearing today.
Yeah, lovely rings they are.
They're designed, for people, we'd say, who maybe have anxious moments or whatever, that instead of, kind of, maybe you might have a tendency to kind of pick at your fingers or whatever, but that you'd spin the little gadgets on the ring, and that then, again, it kind of takes you out of the mindset of thinking anxious thoughts because you're engaged in another activity.
Yeah, definitely.
So something as simple, like sometimes we underestimate, as you said earlier, it's the simple things often that work best.
Yeah.
And the things that you love, and that captivate you as a person, in terms of your own personality and your own style, they're the things that you need to tap into that will help you in terms of, minimizing your anxiety and keeping your mood levels elevated.
Yeah. I fully agree with you. And I think, probably the weakness about Mood Watchers was that I never found out if people continued doing the things afterwards.
Yeah.
I was always hoping that they would. I met people who would always refer to flow, who rediscovered a hobby that they held on to for years because of Mood Watchers. Or tried something new that they never did before and discovered that they were very good at it. Because actually a lot of people wait until they retire, until they try things out. And you can hit the jackpot in your 60s and discover that you're an artist or that you're actually a gifted musician. No, it's never too late, but it's a pity you didn't know that in your 20s when you're under serious pressure.
Absolutely.
Or in your 30s. A hobby is the greatest friend you can have.
100%.
And like you and I know, I've said to parents, give your children 2 or 3 hobbies to prove to be lifelong friends. So hobbies are hugely important. As is social connection, that's another one. Because I've always said that the single greatest friend of depression is solitude.
Yes.
And you don't have to live on your own to experience that. You detach yourself from the people who you're living with. And the greatest enemy of depression is social connection. Like, where are we more likely to forget about our worries? And we all have those at times, lying on a couch in your own company or out and about, whether you feel like it or not. And the more friends you have, the better. And I'm at a stage now, I suppose, you get wiser as you grow older, where I'm not as fussy about the type of friends I have. Like, I often say to parents to tell your children, friends the year above them, friends the year below them, friends from the other school, their cousins, friends on the road, lots of pockets of friends.
But also friends with sincerity, Shane.
Yeah,
I
big
think that's
time.
important.
Yeah, big.
Yeah.
But those are special friends, those friends.
Yeah.
But I also think that sometimes we underestimate friends that you can just have a chat with. They're
yeah.
nice to have in
Yeah,
Tesco or in the
absolutely.
car
People
park
that
with
you link
football
up with
match or
every
whatever,
so often,
and to remember their names. You don't have to get closer to them. You don't have to let them get closer to you. But I think sometimes people don't even do that anymore.
Acquaintances.
Yeah, it's nice to have those people.
Yeah.
And those sometimes can develop even into friendships.
Yeah.
Deeper friendships down the line. So I think we have to be open-minded, and a lot of us talk to the same people about the same things. And it's so refreshing
You never
to talk.
learn anything new. Yeah.
Big time.
Mm.
It's so much more exciting sometimes to talk to different people about different things.
Yeah.
But you have to push yourself out, Denise.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And sometimes you have to really push yourself out. You might have to join something.
Yeah.
That you on your own, which is a very courageous thing. Not everyone can do that. But, to join up something on your own and instantly you have all new people straight away. Do you know what I mean?
Shane, I want to talk to you about, because obviously this is another hobby of yours, which is that you wrote a book, Your Precious Life, How to Live Well. And you're also in the process of writing another book at the moment, Practical Resilience, which I know is going to be out later this year.
Yeah.
And you're also a published poet.
Correct.
10 lines.
Yeah.
So again, can you chat a little bit? First of all, I want to ask you about, because I'm not as aware of your poetry, Shane, but I love poetry.
Yeah.
Always have done. And have you always kind of been, because I suppose, associate poetry with kind of sensitive souls. Have you always had that in your nature?
Yeah, I did. I certainly didn't let the lads know at school that I was writing poems.
Yeah.
But my favourite subject was English. And I was writing poems a lot at school. And I had this dream. Maybe other people were thinking about being a rock musician or famous. I'd love to get a book of poems published. And I started sending off poems to journals. I researched what journals to send them to. And you might send 40 poems away with stamps, and you might get 4 replies. And they might all say, thank you very much, but no thanks.
Thank you. Yeah.
But when I went to college first year, I sent a few of them away that year, and they were taken on. And that meant, it's not that I was looking for credibility, but when you're published in a reputable poetry journal, I suppose you can say that when you go to a publisher, but poetry is a small business. Like if you and I were to stand in Easton's and just watch the poetry section for the full day, very few people go over to it.
Sure.
They're usually diehards that might buy 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But it's a section that not many people go to. So you never pay your bills with poetry.
Sure.
And it's not about that. If you're a Seamus Heaney who's selling books of poems throughout the world, as he did at the time, that you might have some chance of paying your bills and winning awards like the Nobel and all that. But yeah, I have actually 3 books of poems published, and the most recent one is Thin Lines.
And what do you mind me asking? At what stage of life did you publish your first book of poetry?
I would have been about 30 years of age at the time.
And and at that stage, had you kind of let go of the fear of what your pals or what your peers?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and I remember I've never told you this before, but I remember I was asked to speak at the Patrick Kavanagh Festival. Not to speak, but to share my poems at that. So these people paid in. Now, I didn't get the money, but they paid in, and I was sitting on a stool with a microphone. Yeah. And I remember thinking, wow, this is a great gig.
Huge moment. Yeah.
And our former colleague, Andrew Honeyman, by pure chance, was attending it. So he discovered for the first time that I was writing poems then. And after that, when a few things like that happen, when you get poems published, when you get invited to read poems at a festival, and then you can send them off to a publisher and hope that maybe they might take them on. So that's what happened with me. The first one was The Dark Room. The second one was Stilling the Dance of Time. And the third one is Thin Lines, which looks at the thin lines between, I suppose, being healthy and unhealthy, between being young and old, between believing and not believing. There's a whole lot of thin lines that run through our lives. And I think poetry...
What's visible and what's invisible.
Yes, yeah. I think psychology tends to make sense of human behaviour by observing from the outside. And I think poets do it from the inside.
Yeah.
So it's very raw poetry. It's very honest. It's people exposing their own vulnerabilities. And I brought the poetry into Mood Watchers as well. So I'd share the odd poem and things.
Yeah, I might get you to recite a poem later.
And again, I think it was reassuring people that this psychologist who's given us all this information, I used to say to him, I says, like, I'm not a guru. Like, everything I'm teaching you, I stole it from cross-cultural research. I says, I'm just making it easy to understand. But I says, at the end of the day, I need it myself.
Yeah.
And I think poetry probably was a way of me reminding myself that I do need the psychology that I teach for myself.
Yes.
And that
we have to practice what we preach.
I think so.
Yeah.
And all good things need effort.
Yeah.
And I can't remember, someone come over to me once and she said to me, I was with my wife at a book launch or something, and she says to me, God, it must be great living with him. No stress. God, I'd bring him home myself. And I says, geez, I can assure you, I'd be very stressed. And I told that woman a story. I says, it was one morning, I says, I slept in. I was working with National Air Network at the time, and I jumped out of my bed at 10:20, like a madman. And I says, oh my God, I says, I'm meant to be in Dundalk for 10:30. Even by a helicopter, I'm late.
Yeah.
But I shouted with my stress. I said, who's in charge of the socks in this house? What kind of a sock system have we here? And I drove off to Dundalk. But when I came back, my wife wanted to talk to me about the sock system.
Right.
So I think we all could be stressed. I said, there's no sock system. That's just me being a bit obnoxious with being late.
Yeah.
So I tried to let that woman know that we're all like that. We all have stresses.
Human.
We all have strains. We're all imperfect. But it's about giving it the best shot, isn't it?
Exactly. Exactly.
Because we all deserve a good life, despite the things that happen. And why wish for it? Why keep your fingers crossed?
Yeah.
Why not just do things that are proven scientifically to help? Even to try them out is a good idea.
That's what I was just going to say, actually, to try things, and that, we all get it wrong. We all get it wrong across all aspects of life at different stages. But it's about, like that, dusting yourself down and trying again, And
some things won't work. There might be things you like that don't work for me, and vice versa.
Yeah.
But I think if that will to give things a go and give things a proper go, that's a great discipline, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So then moving on to your precious life, How to Live Well.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what this book is all about?
Well, that book, I got a phone call from a lady called Alva O'Reilly, who's a literary agent. And I think she worked with the Blackhall Press at that time. Yeah. And she asked to meet me in Dublin in 2016. And she had attended a talk I gave to parents in a school in Dublin. Yeah. And I remember getting a phone call from her, and I thought I'd won the lotto. Yeah. She says, I want to meet you about a book. Yeah. And I says, God, this is fantastic. But books don't sell as much as people might think. It's very hard to sell books. The big fat beach bum novels, you have a better chance. But it was an honour to be asked. And what she said is that she would not only offer me a contract to sign, but she would also push me to write it. Yeah. Now, I was sorry I agreed to the second part because she really pushed. Yeah. But it would never have been finished only for her, I think. Yeah. And I had to go through 2 editors. It's quite humbling when people aren't happy with how you write things and ask them to be written a different way, or where you infer something and they don't know what you mean and that kind of stuff. So it was hard writing it, but I got it out, and it was a great success. And that would have, from my career perspective, that opened an awful lot of doors for me. So I mightn't have become a millionaire from the sales of the books, but I certainly had much more opportunities in my work because of the book.
Yeah.
So, and that's good when you're self-employed.
And again, it's kind of to do with practical skills for living well.
Yeah, it probably is a manual for mood watchers, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's basically what it was, really, but a few extra chapters.
Yeah.
I was trying to, like, a lot of people even recognize the same stories that I gave in the talks in the book, which is the best way I had of explaining the same points in a different format. But that book is something which I owe an awful lot to, I think, in many, many ways.
Yeah. Shane, as someone who uses humour all the time...
Well, I've always told you I take my humour very seriously, Denise.
How important, in general, do you think humour is? Do you think that people have become terribly serious?
Yes, massively so. Like, I often refer to two syndromes. Like, I tell the audience, and they think I'm serious. They don't know I'm acting the cod, but I said there's two syndromes. I say that I'm doing a lot of research on at the moment, and hopefully I'll be able to have a diagnostic questionnaire for the next time I meet you. I said, and I don't want you to get a fright if you think you have them, because I'm willing to help you. But the first one is serious boring person syndrome. And I think that you get that when you're made permanent. Or when you settle down. But a lot of people who have serious boring person syndrome only talk about their jobs. They don't mean it's just you meet them in the pub and they're still talking about HR and working harder for less money and the changes are needed in the organisation. And it become, I suppose, engulfed by their work circumstances. And between work and sleep, that's all they're doing really with their life. And the second syndrome is serious busy person syndrome. And a lot of people can convince themselves very easily that they have no time to do the things that they love doing, except work and sleep. And I think you have to take those syndromes on sometimes. Like, I'm talking in jest, there's no such syndromes. Although I'd be very interested in the questionnaire, because you could diagnose people as mildly boring, moderately boring, or severely boring. You could say, when were you promoted? That's what happened. And so I think, and sometimes I say, I think you get the point. I often say that, a remedy for serious boring person syndrome would be a half an hour in a bouncy castle for some people, but that's only short term. But sometimes people need to loosen up. They become stiff with stress. They spend the life that they have and that they only live once doing the things that they feel they're meant to be doing. Do you know what I mean? Rather than having a say in it.
Becoming like offended by everything. It's like everything becomes an offence.
And I think, I suppose humour is a huge part of me. I don't know. I suppose I think a lot of our personality is genetically predetermined. My father was a funny man. He told stories. He retold stories. He did the voices. And we'd often say, switch off the television, say, can you tell us that one again, please? And maybe that's a bit of my father in me. But at school, I always acted the maggot. At college, I took Rag Week very seriously. And I think there was a part of me that was always having a laugh. And there was a part of me that loved humour. And humour is often the breakthrough. And especially when we're laughing at ourselves. And, when that happens, it's a great thing. And I remember someone saying to me once, and this startled me actually, they said, if you knew what I'm going through at the moment, Shane, it's very hard to rise to humour no harm to you. And I sat with that person and they were brokenhearted. And I says, listen, I fully get that. I says, I fully understand why you can't laugh. But I says, don't shoot the messenger. I'm only giving you the science. And for people who, like you, have good reasons not to feel like laughing, if you hang around with good humoured people, it's actually contagious. And humour, and the studies by Dr. William Fry and others have shown that even people who don't have that natural sense of humour, who don't feel like laughing for very good reasons, can catch it. And that's why a good humoured friend's a great asset. Or a good member, a member of staff who sees things a funny way. You don't want it the whole time or it'll annoy you. But you can't exit them from the building.
But and I think that's actually an important point, Shane, because sometimes I think Humour, look, I
Yeah.
think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think where would we be if, we
Yeah.
weren't able to have a laugh? And particularly in our profession, I think it's really important to have a sense of humour and to maintain a sense of
Yeah.
humour. But I think, sometimes where it can get tricky for people is if they constantly use humour to mask,
Yeah.
really serious or
That's
really
true. Very
difficult
true.
stuff that is actually
Yeah,
going on
yeah,
behind
yeah,
the scenes.
yeah.
And I think that's where you strike a lovely balance in that you have the ability to switch from like that, having the crack or cracking a joke with
Yeah.
somebody, but you can go right into kind of the vulnerability side as well, even in terms of yourself and how you express.
Yeah, well, thank you, Denise. Yeah, but I think humour, I think in stories, that's part of who I am. And I think when we see ourselves in the stories, that can be a breakthrough. When people realise you're very similar to them, that you're vulnerable, that you're imperfect, that you're trying as best you can. Like when you can portray those qualities
Yeah.
in any shape or form, people might listen to you more. No one wants to be talked down to by an expert.
No, not at
Do you know what I
all.
mean?
And that
People-
day's
yeah,
gone.
that day's gone.
Absolutely gone.
And there was too much power in
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
and I think when people realise that you're human like me, they might engage with some of the ideas that you have, which might help them. And there's no research out there which shows that being a psychologist insulates you from mental illness.
Absolutely.
Like there's lots of psychologists with depression, anxiety, social phobia, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
We're all human at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes people had the wrong idea. I think they thought we were experts, that
you have the answers
like
to
that woman
everything.
with me, there must be no stress in that house.
Yeah.
I says, of course there's stress in the house. I'm human like she is, like anyone else is. But I think the one advantage that I have from the work that I've been doing is that I'm less likely to forget about the things that I teach because I'm saying them so often. And, so I probably do much more in terms of my own investment in my own well-being than I ever did because of the career path I've taken. In that, for instance, flow, there's so many hobbies I have.
Yeah.
Like I love music. I had antique clock repairs. I'm doing gardening now and learning more about gardening, nature connectedness. Like I'm doing that because I want to have a good life, but I know all of that is good for me as well. So I'm legislating for those things.
Absolutely. But I don't think it's possible actually to work effectively with people unless you practice what you're actually, advocating for people to do. You have to kind of put it into practice yourself. Because I think it actually it comes through. People will actually be able. They'll be able to sense from you. Like,
you're right.
Are you
Denise.
just talking the talk?
Yes, you're right, and it's more convincing if they know.
Yeah.
And I would be sharing things like that from. I say to people, I don't want you to become like me, God forbid. But I'm just telling you about things I'm doing which are helping me.
Exactly.
And if you want to try them, you can. But I think it's more convincing then in terms of getting the messages across if they know that you're actually trying them. And you're trying them yourself. It's authentic. Yeah.
Okay. So coming back to more recently, you've joined the National Learning Network again, which again is, supports people with additional support needs. What are some of the things, Shane, that you've noticed in terms of the client profile, the client population that we're now supporting as distinct from when you joined, a number of years ago? What have you maybe noticed, like in terms of
big things?
client profiles?
Because clinical work is something that I walked away from, and that's the real psychology, I think. That's when you're in touch with people, and that's when you, I suppose, are sensitive to what's going on in our society at the time. When I started first, I think across those 4 counties, I did 4.5 years with the organisation, and that's 23 years ago. I'm back in NLN in Sligo helping out now, and there's a number of things. First of all, I'm not totally surprised, but anxiety has hit me left, right, and centre. So there's a lot more anxiety presenting. I remember in the first job I had, it was mostly depression, predominantly depression. So there's an awful lot of anxiety. There's a lot of people who don't speak English as well. They've come to this country. There would have been very little of that 24 years ago. Very, very little of it. Where you have to make sure that they understand you, where you have to repeat things, where you might have to write things down.
Sure.
I think that might have been 0% actually, if I go back to the beginning. You have people who sometimes have temporary addresses. So, they can't say that they're living here fully
Sure.
forever.
Yeah.
They're kind of moving around places. And you have, I suppose, a lot of people who, have been hurt by the education system, which we alluded to at the very beginning. That's still the case. A lot of people feel that they have been let down and that the system wasn't flexible towards their needs.
Which NLN are very good at.
Which you're very, very good at that.
Yeah.
I think the one thing, and this is the truth, sometimes you see things better from a distance. I've often said, when you go into an art gallery, the mistake is to be too close to the piece. If you step back, you see it properly. It's a bit like going to a wedding. You mightn't have been seeing your cousins in years, and all of a sudden you get a shock with how people have changed. It could be a young child, it's now a young man or a young woman, or it could be someone who's much older than you thought. It's because of the gap of time that you see things differently. And I have to say this, that that gap of time, when you return to National Learning Network, that organisation that I worked with at the beginning, the one thing I have to say is how impressed I am with how authentic and how genuine all of it is, and how competent the staff are in NLN and Sligo, and that they're doing everything they can for people who are there with various needs to make sure that they have a meaningful life, that they can feel part of their communities. And I forgot about how noble and how important that work is when I wasn't doing it.
You've 2 adult children, Sorcha and Dara.
Yes.
Yeah. How much has, I suppose, your work as a psychologist impacted how you have parented over the years?
Good question. I wasn't prepared for that one, but that's no harm. It's something I think that has definitely influenced me, because it's similar to the mood watchers. When you're teaching things, about wellness and happiness and resilience on a regular basis, when you're trying to convince people to bring people with you, like when you apply that to parenting, I've done a lot of work on parenting as well.
Yeah.
And when you research and you look at the things we should be doing as opposed to the things we should not be doing, I probably was more likely to do some of the right things. I've always said to parents that we're not perfect. Like, I had 2 wonderful parents that I still miss and I still think about every day, but they didn't get everything right. But they got a lot of the very simple things right. I always felt loved. I always felt that they would vote me number 1 no matter what. I always felt that if I had done wrong, that I didn't have to run away or anything like that. That there might be tension, but we'd sort it out. I always knew that they made sacrifices for me. And I'd like to think that both my kids, who are now adults, would have felt the same about me. And that I would never have said I was a perfect father, but I took the role very seriously. And I did the best I could during those years when they were growing up. And I'm still doing the best I can to be the best father I can be. And I think it's wonderful when you have kids that don't mind being with you anymore, or when you can have a pint or go to a concert or a football match, or, just have a meal and shoot the breeze and be yourself with your children and them with you. I think if that is achieved, you've done reasonably well as a parent.
I want to kind of always leave the last thought or the last reflection with the guest. And what I wanted to ask you was, we'd say for somebody who might be tuning in, who maybe is suffering with, whether it's, that they're suffering with low mood, that they have like clinical depression, chronic anxiety, maybe they have an addiction, maybe they're going through relationship difficulties. What would you say to that person today?
I think there's definitely help out there. I'm not saying that for the sake of it. I'm not trying to say the right thing. But you can be helped with things when you have an open mind. And sometimes people are more closed-minded than they know. And that, when people believe deep down that they're not understood or that no one can help them, it's very hard to have a breakthrough.
Yeah.
But an open mind's a great thing. And if you have to pay for it, it's worth paying for it. But, I think if you have to go to a psychologist around unhappiness, symptoms of depression or anxiety or whatever, I think it's a sound investment. And I think you should always commit to at least 6 sessions. I know a lot of men who give up after 2. The feeling, I don't think so, she doesn't really connect with me, or I don't really like his approach. I think with that kind of therapeutic process, we must be patient with it. Like you and I know that the first session is only information gathering. You're only trying to get to know the person and what's going on right now. So that's one session that doesn't really count in terms of benefits for the person that's coming to get therapy. But after 6, 7, 8 weeks, I think there's a very good chance the person will be feeling better if they're doing the things that they should be doing.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to enlist support from someone who loves you.
Yeah.
Because it's easy sometimes to be told what you should do, but it's easier doing the things you should be doing within the right culture.
Exactly.
So if you have someone who loves you, who wants to encourage and coax you to do the things,
and you trust that person.
Yeah, that person. Yeah. I think that'll help a lot as well.
Yeah.
Do you know?
And obviously, it stands to reason that if anyone is listening in who is in a chronic place and that they've had enduring mental health difficulties over a long period of time, to consult with your GP.
Big time.
That's obviously really important.
And GPs get a bad press sometimes, but I think that's because people think, if you go to the GP, you're going to get medication. And I say to people,
medication has its place.
Yeah. And the only problem with medication sometimes is if it's not working, then it has to be reevaluated and checked. But there's people I meet who I would classify as fully recovered, who take a tablet a day.
Yeah.
They're basking in the glory of life.
Yeah.
And they would say to you and me that they owe it to medication.
Yeah.
So you're right about that, Denise. I think sometimes you have to be willing with an open mind to try everything.
Yeah.
And then you're entitled to your views when you have tried everything. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Fantastic. Shane, will you read us one of your poems before we finish up?
Yeah, I will. And it brings me back to childhood, really. I think when I moved to Sligo, I think I fell in love with Sligo. And when you fall in love, everything changes. But I get my therapy on the beaches of Streeja, Ross's Point, Strand Hill, around Ben Bulben. Like, I get something from those places. And since I've moved to Sligo, I'm more connected to nature. And when I was a child, I used to be very connected to nature. Like I think we all were. We used to run through fields. I used to climb trees. I used to chase dandelions. When you blow the puff smoke of the dandelion. I used to talk to cows. I was very connected to nature as a young boy. I used to be excited with tadpoles in Mrs. Finnegan's class at primary level becoming frogs. I used to stick leaves into copybooks. Do you mean? We were very connected to nature when we were younger. And then we're kind of sucked into these buildings called schools where we learn things that people feel we need to know in order to be successful in life. And we disconnect.
Yeah.
And there's a great therapy in nature. So the poem I was going to read, it brings me back to my grandfather's field as a young boy and the magic that I used to have. It's called A Child in the Field. I was full of it. Pouring over the brim were my dreams and wind-spun plans, circling with newly freed leaves, wildly chasing new ways, and there was a dance. Spring stuck to my soles, my eyes as wide as my field, my lips shaping words like melody. I sang my heart out through the pants and jumps, and I stretched my arms out to catch butterflies and dandelion parachutes, sprinting through the hay maze to reach the stream. And there I watched wordless as water bubbled, frothing at the greens. I needed no one at all, for you smiled at me in the clouds as I jumped through breeze rings, walked tightropes on fallen branches, clowned with chickens, marched my authority beside heedless horses. I had a kingdom, a palace built with bales, and I crowned myself on the highest peak, where the cars on the Shercock Road were at my command. And I lay in the shade of hedges, flat on my grass shroud, feeling my field float on the waters of passing time. I was in the storybook. Oak trees were wizards, low-flying crows witches, me a soldier with a pitchfork, mouldering the stacks in a bloodless fight. The cabbage bundles like an army beheaded in the lumpy clay. The dangling tractor tire was a king swinging from a branch on a hill. The drumlins were nipples on Gulliver's chest, the lanes his rib cage as he snored the breeze. As I swung my legs on the iron gate, the hens at my beck and call, me, the headmaster, a sudden shout would make them scatter, and my presence was enough to instill obedience, respect from the lazy cows that slapped flies with dung-soaked straps. And I suffered my little childhood, and the night air cold, until the night trees whispered their eternal call. For under the moon lovers fall, and through the silver beams lost is all. Just that
Beautiful,
there.
Shane.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Shane Martin.
Thank you,
Pleasure
Denise.
as always, and thank you so much.
It's lovely
for
to be
coming
chatting to my former colleague here on our very, very
Fantastic.
successful podcast. Thank you very much, Denise.
Thank you so much, Shane.